Welcome to Tea Time with Shayleigh and Amber. I'm Shayleigh Evans, and I'm a life coach for pets and their people. I'm a truth seeker, and it's my passion to empower others and to give animals a voice along the way.
I'm Amber Leidick, and I've been a performance horse trainer focused on behavioral issues for over 20 years. My current passion is creating impactful in-person and online events and collaborating with professionals to be on the leading edge of positive change in the horse industry.
We are two friends invested in theta healing, belief system work, animal communication, and any resources that benefit human-animal partnerships. So turn up the volume and let's dive into the Great Awakening, brought to you by our horses. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are super excited to be talking with Sunny Bayne. Welcome, Sunny.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We're super excited about it. For those of you that don't know, Amber and I met Sunny at Elements of Connection in North Carolina, and it was one of those things where she immediately was adopted as soul family. Like we were just like, this is our person. And I felt like, yeah, it was just like an instant bond with everyone. And you totally live up to your name. You're totally a little ray of sunshine. So we are really excited to be talking with you. For people who don't know who you are, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to and that sort of thing?
Awesome. Okay, so my name is Sunny, and let's see, I'll just start with basically I found Elements of Connection because I've been on this like spiritual journey for, I guess, about the past 8 years or so. I'm a personal trainer and I own Soul Fitness with my wife. She's also my business partner. Her name is Stephanie. And then I have two daughters, Mia and Simone. So they're my stepdaughters, but I call them my daughters. And then what else? Yeah, that's basically what I do. And I also, in my free time, I ride horses and help people with problem horses. So horses that are what I say misunderstood. So typically the fillies that are just angry or whatever. So I like to go in and like help people retrain and have conversation with the horses. So that's what I do as a hobby. And I also love to skate as a hobby.
Skate? What kind of
Awesome.
skating?
Rollerblade,
Oh,
speed
that's fun.
skating.
And well, how come I didn't know that? That one,
I
I was like,
know.
wait a minute, where did that come
I do it for fun. I actually I started skating when I was 7 and broke my arm. So I couldn't skate anymore for a bit. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get really good at this. And so I've just skated for fun for, I don't know, 25 years now, I guess. So yeah, that's just my off time when I'm not riding horses or training people all day.
Yeah, and
That's so
then
awesome.
I know. I was like, wait a minute, that one took me off guard. Um, and so we know that you have an entire horse journey that I don't know if it led you to what you do now, but I remember from Elements of Connection, you sharing your story of just minor injuries that you may have had over the
Little
years.
ones.
That when I heard this, I was like, oh, she has to come on the podcast because I feel like it's so relevant for people because of what we do is so dangerous, as far as just animals being animals and being so large, that there's so many people that get hurt and then they're recovering physically, but then also from a mental standpoint, getting back and doing that. And so do you want to share? Well, we're just going right in. Do you want to
Yes.
share? Because I
I
feel
love
like then it leads into, I don't know if it does, but I'm maybe guessing that it has something to do with what you do now as far as with the body stuff.
Yes.
Do you want to share
So
that?
yes, of course. So I started riding around the age of 10. My whole family has not like they were not horse people or athletic people. So I was kind of like the oddball out there, and I just asked for a horse from the day I was born, like most horse people. And so when I was 10, I started riding my Shetland pony bareback. And I think what I shared with you all is that the way that I learned to ride and the reason why I had so many injuries is my grandfather wasn't like a great horseman. He just had horses. And so he was taught like to break horses in a pond kind of person. And so basically I begged every day for like or excuse me, let me back up. Um, we moved to Wayne County and he had a pony. And I was like, oh my God, please can I ride this horse? And every day he would just be like, no, no, no. And then finally, he was like, okay, so or no, I went up to the horse and I like gave her a big hug and like wrapped my arms around her. I was like, man, I wish I could ride you, horse. And then like before I knew it, he grabbed like the back of my pants and threw me on her back. And she's not broke. She was like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And then I was like, and I like sat up and I like look over and he had like the biggest smile on his face and he smacked her on the ass and he was like, hold on. And so I like held on to her. And of course, she takes off bucking and I hit the ground. I was like, I'm never riding horse. Her name was Horse, by the way. She was a pony, and I named her Horse because I'm very literal. And so she threw me off, and I was just like, I'm never riding horse again. He said, oh, yes, you are. You've been asking to ride her for months. And so he like put me back on her, and I got bucked off again. And so that's kind of like how I learned. Like, I didn't even know when I was like 22, I think I saw my first round pin. Like, I was like, wait, what? Like, you just don't go bareback in the middle of a field and ride it like a dirt bike. And so, anyway, that's how I learned to ride. And so he didn't think that I would stick with it. His quote was, you're not going to stick with it, so I'm not buying you a saddle. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna ride. And so I rode her every day at a walk with like the halter and lead rope. And I learned how to ride. So now I'm like really grateful for that because, you have to like really learn to connect with the horse. And so then at like 6 months, he ended up getting me a saddle and a bridle. And I just like would ride her all over town, like everywhere. I would be like, ride my horse. And every person would like get bucked off too. And I'd be like, it's fine. You just got to get back on. So anyway, that led into, I ended up getting a speed racking horse and he was natural gait. I just rode him like with like bare feet. And he taught me a lot, but he used to rack at like 29 miles an hour. So anybody that likes saddlebreds or racking horses, like it was very, very fast. And I didn't realize like how fast he could go, but he was my dude. And the first injuries began with that horse. And now like looking back and people that are listening in, if you ever get the opportunity to go to Elements of Connection, I'm sure Amber will get that together one day soon. I would highly recommend because they had us go through a practice of like letting go of like our old behaviors and like the horseman that we used to be, because I used to be like, man, if I could just go back and like do things differently, I would, but I didn't know. So one injury that I had was I used to ride him on the road and he was scared of like big trucks. And so I was like riding back from like a 20-mile like trail ride on the pavement. And then, so coming up the hill, there's a big bank, and this truck comes, and I'm like, oh no, he's gonna lose his mind, but it's okay, we can do this. And so the guy had like buckets on the truck, and so it made loud noises. He like freaks out, tries to go up the like bank, and when he went to like jump over it, he started to fall backwards. So I was like, oh no, he's like gonna fall on me. So I like ended up like letting go and coming off the back, but that like somehow, to my knowledge, catapulted him up the hill. And so his back foot hit me in the head. And then I like spun around and hit the pavement. So I like broke my jaw and like all of this area. And so just like poor horsemanship stuff, right? And so there's like a million stories like that. But like the most intent, and I'm leading into like fitness too. So the reason why I got into it. So that was at 12. And then at 14, we went to a horse show and he was doing the speed racking classes and I wore like church pants. And like everybody knows like church pants are like silk. And I also put Shoshin all over his body because I didn't know. And I had, I don't know if you have anybody on here that rides saddlebreds and racking horses, but they have like long shank bits. So any pressure that you put on them, I mean, it puts like a lot of pressure in their mouth. And so he was a stallion, and I was 14, so you're not supposed to take stallions to shows. You're supposed to be 16 or maybe even 18. But I didn't know any better and I was a little hillbilly. So I went anyway and didn't follow the rules. And he smelled a mare that was in heat. And so I wanted to be a trick rider. So I used to teach him to like rear up and I would like stand on his back and like practice on my own and had no idea how. We didn't grow up with a lot of money, so I didn't have like a trainer of any kind. And so I like taught him to rear up and I thought it was so fun. But that day I decided to wear English for the first time and hadn't really practiced in it much, had church pants on and Shoshin on the mane and long shank bits. So come on. And so then he goes to go to this mare and he like rears up and then I have nothing to grab onto because I'm sliding in the church pants. And so I'm like, oh God. And so I remember like pulling his, I was just grabbing. And so I pulled his reins, which we were like on a small hill. And then he ended up flipping back on me. And so I knew, like, I could just see in that moment, I was like, oh shit, this is going to be bad. And so, like, I curled up in a ball, like on my right side. And so that ended up, he landed on top of me, and that broke my pelvic bone on the right side, my tailbone. It dislocated this shoulder, tore all the ligaments and tendons. And so that kind of leads in. And I think I told you all this part of it, but basically, they took me in an ambulance. I couldn't move. They thought I was paralyzed. They took me to Somerset. And then at Somerset, like the phone call that everybody got, my best friend was with us, and she called and said, Brenna was like, Sunny can't move and there's blood coming from her head. Like, and then she was like sobbing. And so everybody gets to the hospital and they think that I'm dead. And, which part? So the ambulance driver, I wish that I could talk to this man, because I was like screaming the entire time, because you're like on the bumps in the field, and I'm just like literally dying. And so he just like got me so calm before we got to the hospital, chilled me out. And like, I wish I could thank him, because he was my angel in that moment. But we get to the hospital, and because they thought that I could potentially be dead, my mom or whoever called um, Pastor Mike. So he was like one of the big pastors in Monticello. So he shows up, and then everybody starts showing up because they all think that I died. And the whole point of telling you this part of the story is we were at Somerset Hospital, and they had to fly me in a helicopter to UK. And the reason why they were going to fly me was because my right femur was crushed. And so he shows the x-rays. And I remember at that point they showed the x-rays, and they were like, okay, so the femur is crushed. So we have to fly you to UK to have that surgery. And so I was on morphine. So I was like, I don't care what you do. And then Pastor Mike, I remember he like put his hands on my femur, and then all of these people were there from the church that I was going to, and they all like, like at church where you put your hands on each other. So they all started like praying for me because of the femur. And he was like, she may never walk again with all the other injuries, blah, blah, blah. And so he was doing all this like ritualistic like prayer. And now like in retrospect, like I understand what he was doing. But so they fly me after that, everybody leaves. They fly me to UK, and I got there. And so it's procedure to re-x-ray. So they x-rayed everything. And then the doctor comes in, and he's like, okay, so there's good news and bad news, or weird news. And so we were like, okay. And so he puts the x-rays up, and it was the crushed femur, or the one from Somerset. And then he puts up like the new x-rays, and he was like, so you have a broken pelvis, you have a broken tailbone, your shoulder, there's nothing wrong there. And so anyway, I'll get back to that. But he said, but for some reason, and this could possibly happen with like, maybe they x-rayed it, something happened with the x-ray, but the femur was crushed in the first one. And then the other one, there's nothing wrong with the femur. And so the bone was like totally fine. And that's the one that's why I was at UK. So they were like, I'm not sure how this happened. And so I'm like, was hospitalized for 8 or 9 days. And then I told the doctor, I said, I know that you're telling me that nothing's wrong with my shoulder, but there's something really wrong with my shoulder. So then I got an MRI, and it was dislocated. The ligaments and tendons were torn, but like every injury that I had was self-healing, is what they told me. So they were like, so you'll be in a wheelchair, you're in a neck brace, you're in a sling, but like you're good, basically. So I never got physical therapy for any of it. So I was in a wheelchair for 45 days, or no, excuse me, 30 days. And he said that I wouldn't start walking again until January, and the accident happened September 1st. And so I was like, my birthday is October 15th. So I will be walking on my birthday, because it's my 15th birthday. And so he was like, okay, he was like, I love your enthusiasm, but just know that you're probably not going to start walking until January. So I was walking on my birthday. So I was like,
Of course you were.
5 days later, and I was walking very slowly, but I was like weight bearing at that point. So I just remember when I was going through that injury, I was just like, oh, I can't wait to run again. And I would just like think about running, and I would think about moving my body and like playing and riding horses again. And so then fast forward, there were other injuries here and there throughout that point. And then I hit about 22. And then this started like really, really hurting pretty bad. Like I still can't sleep on my right side for like 2 minutes, and then I have to flip over. So I ended up having to rehab my shoulder and my pelvis and my tailbone because my tailbone was just like would hurt, like feel uncomfortable. And so one of my friends, he was like, okay, I'm going to take you through all this. So there's a book out there called Becoming a Supple Leopard. It's a really great book. But basically, if you have any joint pain, he teaches you how to rehab that issue. So I started learning that and I was like, okay, like this is really cool. And then I was serving at that point in bartending. And one of my friends, I was just like confiding in her. And I was just like, I miss horses so much because I had horses up until I was like 19, 20. And then I ended up going to college or 19. I was in college. And so I had to like make the decision to like adopt my horses out or selfishly like keep them and not take care of them. So I ended up having to adopt them out and was away from horses. And so I was like, I just miss them so much. And she was like, well, my dad works at the racetrack. And I was like, I know it sounds like I grew up under a rock, but I was like, I was like, what's the race? What do you mean? And so she connects me with her dad, who was a trainer. And so I went out to the Thoroughbred Training Center, which is another training center in Kentucky. So you have Keeneland and the Thoroughbred Training Center. And so I went out there and I told him I love to ride horses and I love to go really fast. And he was like, okay. And so he puts me on no, what was her name? Something Dabbles. But anyway, he puts me on this racehorse that was in for a race 2 days later. And so he was like, I'm just going to take you out into this back field where you're not supposed to ride, especially if you're not licensed. And so I'm like, he said, just gallop her around the field. And I was like, hell yeah. And so I just like basically breezed this horse for 2 miles and had no idea. And what I
I
was
love
doing,
this is so like Black Beauty, like movie.
I know
He's like, we're gonna
it's
take you into the backfield and just want to see what you're made of.
literally. And now, like looking back, I'm like, oh, I see what you were doing, Mike. And so I'm back there and this horse is and I'm like having the time of my life. I'm like, yeah, I've never felt a horse go so fast in my life. Cause I'm riding like quarter horses and racking horses and stuff. And so then I come back and I just stop the horse. Like, you normally just stop a horse, but it's a hot racehorse that's race ready. And so the horse, he's like, no, don't. And then in the middle of that, she just starts like rearing up. And I'm like, yeehaw, like I'm having a great time. And I'm like, it's okay, girl, you're fine. And so then he was like, go forward. And I'm like, okay. And so anyway, I take her back to the barn and he was like, the whole point of the story is that's the barn that the North American Racing Academy was in. And so all of the students in the academy were like walking back on their like school horses. And he was like, Chris was like, where did you learn to ride like that? What do you have to be in the academy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, like what's the academy? And so Mike, so that's what put me on the path to be in the North American Racing Academy. But at the time you had to be like 118 pounds to get into the riding portion. So I had to go the horseman's pathway. And so in the horseman's pathway, I ended up learning like natural horsemanship, all the stuff that that I needed to learn. So it was like perfect that I went that pathway instead of the riding pathway. And then that at the end of it, I was like, look, I still want to ride. And so they told me, one of the people that worked there, she was like, you're too fat to ride. Like you can't. And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And so I was like, I mean, I'm 140 pounds. Like, what do you mean? And so anyway, Chris McCarran ended up helping me get a job at Juddmonte, which is a farm and a breaking farm. So I learned how to like break and train racehorses. Ended up going to Ocala to a private track, but they also break, but there's like a track back there. So I kind of got a taste of the racetrack. And then one of my friends there that I galloped with, her name's Kelly Lively. She ended up hooking me up with Dave Lively, her husband, who galloped for Bill Mott at the race. He's a Hall of Fame racehorse trainer. So I'm at this little track and I'm like learning how to gallop and didn't have any like injuries there, which was nice. But that like led me into I needed to get a lot stronger because, when you're galloping, you got to really like hold on without your legs swinging. And I was just pretty weak. So I started working out because my trainer, Jimmy Miranda, who I love, he was like, you've been eating donuts or something? Like just giving me shit. And for me, like that drives me to do something. That doesn't offend me. Like I'm not like I don't get like offended. Like I'm like, okay, like I need to work. I probably do need to get a little stronger. So I go to a gym in Ocala, Florida, and I'm like on the treadmill, no clue what I'm doing, probably doing like some sit-ups or whatever. And I see this girl walk by and she had bomb legs. And I was like, what? I didn't even know a human could look like that. And so I go up to her and I'm just like, hey, Chris, or I didn't know her name at the time. I was like, hey, weird question. Like, can you help me like get my legs to look like yours? And she was like, she just like laughed at me because I'm just like literally from basically under a rock is how I was raised, I guess. And she was like, yeah, I'm like a personal trainer. Like I can help you. And I was like, oh, cool. And so I hired her and started training 3 times a week. And I hated it. I thought it was the worst thing ever. I thought it was so stupid. And my body hurt all the time. And then she was like, you're going to love it. It's going to be fine. And she's like such a light and so positive. And then literally it was like, I started taking progress pictures. And then I saw my 45-day progress and I was like, oh, that's cool. And so I got like really addicted to it because of that and was working out. So then go to the racetrack in New York, do the racetrack thing. Bill Mott like helped me so much. He would like take the pony horse and he would ride next to me and he'd be like, no, do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. So he really mentored me because my first racetrack I ever rode at was Saratoga, which Saratoga is like insane if you've never galloped before. Like it's just really busy. You have to like be aware. And I'm just like, I get to gallop horses. I'm so excited, you know, and they'd be like, Sunny, don't do that. So I had a lot of really good mentors that like helped me and then like really encouraged me and taught me how to gallop. And then a year later, I go like back to Florida because that's where Beaumont goes. And then I come back to Ocala on my way home to gallop in Kentucky. And Crystal was like, why don't you start training people? And I was like, what are you talking about? I have no idea how to train people. Like, I don't know. She was like, you would be really good at it. Like, you really like to help people. You are rehabbing your body, so you're educated on that. So you should train. And I was like, okay. So like in the interim, there was like a 2 month where I was like gonna be in Ocala and then go to Kentucky. And so I mentored under her as I was getting my certification and then just fell in love with fitness in the sense that, like, I don't love to work out for real. Like, I like to work out if I have something to work out for. So, like, when I rode horses, it was much easier for me to work out because I had something to work out for. And so then that kind of put me on my journey of like exercising for yourself and not for external reasons. So basically that gets you up to speed to where I am now for the most part. I ended up staying in Kentucky. I galloped for a few trainers at Keeneland. The career ending injury was I had a chestnut filly. And what's so cool that I learned at like Elements of Connection and what I'm learning now from you all is that like the horse has a voice. And I've always known that. Like I've always been like, this horse does not want to be a racehorse. Like this horse hates it more than anything. But like when, you have 3 people that invested in a horse that spent half a million to $1 million on a horse, they're like, that horse is going to run. I don't care what she wants. And so I started to get really like icky about that. I was just like, I mean, it's nice when you have a horse that wants to gallop, but a lot of the horses don't want to gallop. Like they don't, it's just like humans. Like some people don't want to work out. And so this filly was really bad. But she was in a lot of pain. And I knew that, and the trainer knew that. So she tried to do, they do everything that they can. But she was very mean too. Like if you were walking in the shed row, like Amber or Shayleigh, she would like try to cow kick you in the head. Like she was just miserable. And so at the racetrack, we galloped her at night because she would spook at everything. And that day we had to go during the daylight because when you take them to the gate, you have to go out during the daytime. And then you basically do like a short gallop, like fast. So almost like a breeze, but not because then you're going to take them to the gate. So we're just like me and this girl are galloping like, and it's called in company at the racetrack. So we're galloping next to each other. And she just like out of nowhere, we're galloping like probably going about 28 miles an hour. And she sucks back. And usually you would go off the top, but I didn't. Somehow I didn't. I was like almost all the way off. And then she dodged like all the way to the right. And then that kind of slung my body somehow around her. So then I was holding on to her neck. And we both were like, oh shit. And because she just starts galloping again. Like she's like, oh God. And like, so she just takes off galloping and I'm holding on with my legs. But like, then my legs just started to fall. So our legs like collided and she went down head over heels and landed on top of me. But it was like it just broke my olecranon, which is this. So I have like a plate and screws here. And I asked the universe the day before, I was like, man, I wish I had a break from galloping so I could start
Oh,
my do full-time training, which is
gotta be specific.
you got to be very specific. But it was actually like really great case scenario because I was a freelance rider, but the trainer that I was working for, she's has high standards, and she was just like, so I was on her workman's comp, and so I was off from riding for 11 months from this injury because it was the literally the joint that you have to rehab. So I had an 11-month break from galloping to be able to start my business. So when I say start my business, I was training part-time, but just like for fun, like if people riders wanted help. And so then my training business just really blossomed in that short period of time. And I didn't want to leave my clients. So then I was like, okay, like I'm not going to gallop anymore, which was actually perfect case scenario for me. And then I went up to Steph because she's a business consultant and I knew what she did. She was in corporate America. And so I was like, so I handed her a wad of cash and I was like, I want you to know that I'm not using you because you're my girlfriend. Like, I really want you to help me with my business. I have no clue what I'm doing, but I just know that I want to help people and I want to train people. So we established back then Sunny Bayne Fitness for 5 years. And then we ended up opening Soul Fitness because then I got passionate about helping develop other trainers because throughout all of these injuries and everything that I've been doing that happened to me, I ended up rehabbing my body, but I also got really interested in energy anatomy. So there's a book called Anatomy of the Spirit, and I swear that book is like falling into a portal. The first time you read it, like, okay. And then the next time you read it, it's like a whole nother book because it just like expands your consciousness so much. And then the third time you read it, you're like, oh my God. Like it's so amazing. So I recommend that for anybody. Like if you're a horse trainer, if you're a massage therapist, if you're a people trainer, everybody should read that book. But anyway, I read that book and I've been studying energy anatomy forever. So my goal now with clients is or clients and trainers is I really want to develop trainers to learn about the energy anatomy as well as the physical body anatomy in the training in the human training industry. A lot of people they're just focused on the body, and not everybody. The industry is definitely changing, but it's just like body focus, body mechanics. Here's how the body needs to move. But another thing that validated and also opened my consciousness at elements of connection is like you have to communicate with the body. And like I believe that injuries are an insight into what's going on into the body. So I like to really blend and teach people about their own body when I train them. Like I had a consultation this week where she has all these like issues. She has cancer, breast cancer, or she had breast cancer, and then shoulder issue, and then mid back issue. And so I like to educate them on what that means and talking about the heart chakra and like, let's talk about balancing that out. So I like to dabble in both energy and physical anatomy. So that's kind of what I'm teaching at Soul Academy. And what we will be teaching is we have this where people can go through the CPT through NASM, but also like then after they get that certification, then they can begin to learn from me and from the other trainers that I've trained on how to really tap into that energy anatomy and then work with people. Because like once people understand that, it's like it opens this whole new like world of them able or wanting to have the conversation, but they don't realize they want to have the conversation. Kind of like for people that don't know what, or they might know what I'm talking about, but what Amber and Shayleigh and everybody taught us was that like you go to the body and you say, hey, can I communicate with you? Essentially, like if the shoulder doesn't want to go all the way out here, why does it not want to go out there? I do the same thing with humans. And so then once they're aware of like the right side's connected to masculine, yang energy, giving, and left side is receiving and the feminine and yin energy. And so like once they understand that, then they're like, oh my God. And it just like opens this whole like awareness about their own body. And then some people will like break down crying and then they kind of work through that process. And so anyway, that's what I do. And that's why I got into training and how I use horse medicine with people. And I do believe every day with training, like I'll teach people or tell people lessons that I learned from my horses. And so it's like really cool because like people are getting horse medicine without like actually even touching a horse. So then last thing I'll say before you ask your next question is it's my dream and goal to open a horse human like sanctuary. So I want to get horses that are um quote unquote bad horses or horses that are on the slaughter trucks. So I'm sure a lot of people know that or maybe you don't know that there's not slaughter in America, which is a good thing. Like we don't want horses to be slaughtered, but the bad thing is when they go through the black market and they get buyers, they go to Mexico and China and like go through all this stuff to get there. So I really want to use the skill sets that I've learned from humans and horses and put them together by retraining, rescuing these horses. And then horses that say, hey, I want to be a therapy horse. Hey, I want to be a teacher. Hey, I want to be a one person horse, then they would be placed. But then I want the element of fitness, health, wellness at the spot. So then then I have the humans that I work with that have, depending on what type of issues they may be working with, they might be able to do their fitness training that day, or they might do horse and human rehab training. So that's my long-term goal over the next 10 years or so.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is a few years ago we did our first retreat here, and a really good friend of mine, um, she was a hairdresser, and then she got diagnosed with a ton of stuff, and she transformed her body through Qigong. And so when we had our retreat here, we invited her to come, and I do those mirror sessions where I take people through meditation and the horses are loose and that kind of stuff. But what we did was we had all the participants do the Qigong session in the arena, and we had the horses loose. And
Ooh.
so I immediately get business ideas for people.
Ooh, I love
And
it.
so, but what was cool about it is the horses can tap right into where there's congestion in the body. If you have the right horses, some horses aren't into it, and it's good that they're free, they get to choose. But I had this little herd at the time that were just like, this is our jam. And it was so interesting to watch because they had the entire arena to be in, doing whatever they wanted to do. And they always chose to weave their way through the people doing the session. And they would touch on certain parts of their body. And then people would have these big, like, emotional, like, releases. And so it was just interesting to watch. So the moment you said that, I was like, oh, that's the vision I got. Combining
Wow.
the
So
combining the two.
that's so cool because, and that's what I'm trying to learn is like what modalities are out there. Like and I think that's why I'm away from horses right now for the most part. Like I don't have horses on the daily basis. But I think like the universe is kind of leading me in a direction of learn the human anatomy, learn how to help humans, and then be able to incorporate that and kind of like how you do, Amber. You have all of these clinics that you do, like that's what ideally what I would love a spot, like to have my own spot where you could be like, oh, you do clinics here, like people do clinics and then they bring the medicine. So I don't want to always be the one that's like teaching everything. I almost want to facilitate and I want to do like my thing, like have my job and then have other facilitators, whether they travel in or they live in Lexington.
Mhm.
So that's
That's
really
cool.
cool. I didn't know about Qigong and horses.
Oh yeah, because it's like goat yoga, but better.
Yeah.
Sounds way better.
I'm so curious too, like what your human design is, because I feel like all that
This is
fearlessness
the
and like
question that
drive that you
Shayleigh is
have.
asking
Yeah.
everyone.
I know. I'm like,
I
well,
was
what is your
like,
human design? It's because I'm in Felicity's class right now and she's talking about human design. And now I'm like balls deep in like looking at everybody's charts. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool how I just love like numerology and astrology and stuff. But aside from that, I think it's super cool that you're saying like even without horse people, like you're weaving in horse medicine and you're able to like talk with people about the lessons that horses have taught you. Because I was recently just a guest on someone else's podcast and she asked me if I've ever had imposter syndrome. And I was like, actually, no, because of horse medicine. Like I learned from the horses. I taught like horses are who taught me communication, and I think when you can come from a place of teaching someone through your wholeness and like learning through animals because you are whole and complete and being able to share that without like insecurities and stuff is so powerful. And that's probably why those people are drawn to you. So I think that's awesome.
Wow, thank you. I need to hear more about the human design, whatever that is. So we can talk. I would love to talk more about that because I love astrology as well. Um, but yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me, Shayleigh, because I get nervous like talking about myself, and like it's a balance of like this isn't coming from ego, so then that helps me. But and then you get like I'm like, oh gosh, I got to talk about these things today, and then I'm like, it's okay, like we're just having a conversation. But I think horses have really helped me too to not have imposter syndrome because they're like, it's okay if you mess up. Like you don't have to like know everything or be everything. So I definitely relate to that.
And I'm curious too, like, so just kind of circling back to your injury when people are, I think it's so cool for one that you didn't accept not walking as your truth. Like you were like, this might be your fear-based mentality, this might be your truth, but like I'm going to choose what I accept for my truth. And as someone in a position that's coaching other people, like it's cool to be able to tell people that, like, this is what you're feeling in your body, acknowledge that, but you get to accept what your truth is, and you get to create this reality in your body and in your mind and in your spirit. And interweaving the visualization, how you were like, I'm visualizing riding again, I'm visualizing, like, it's so cool and powerful when someone can visualize. I was actually just reading a study the other day, how they took like 180 something people, and half of them only visualized playing the piano and learning it through visualization for an hour a day, and the other half actually practiced physically every single day. And when they brought them all together and like tested them at the end, the people who visualized and never touched a single piano were just as good as the people who played the actual piano. So
Yeah.
like the visualization, and your brain doesn't know the difference between something that you're seeing and like cultivating that feeling and something that you're doing. And I'm curious, like, do you interweave visualization in your practices with people that you're coaching?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as I learned in my 20s, I was like, oh, like this is what you were doing. Like I was doing that very like that came very authentically to me. Like I was just like, I'm not gonna be able I told that doctor, I was like, no. And then and so like I try to teach people that now. And like also people that have horses that I've worked with, they're like, oh, well, she hurt her leg and a long time ago. And I'll be like, that's she definitely good to get vet checks and do all this stuff, but like just because she had a break, or not a break, but like an injury of some sort, doesn't mean that she doesn't want to be ridden, doesn't mean that she or he doesn't want to work, or because I love to lift weights, I love to put my body through that stuff. But yes, I do. I have clients go through, some clients that are open to it. Most people that come to Soul kind of know what they're getting into because I'm very open about being spiritual and all this stuff. So now that I'm more open about it, because I used to be like not public about it at all, I was like, I'm just a trainer. But now I talk about that I study energy anatomy and tap more into that. People do the visualization work. There's also a really great book. It is called, one second, I have it on my Audible. It's a really great book about, I think it's not the art of winning, but hold on. It's called the psychology of winning. So have you heard of this book?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so basically he talks about like visualization and how important it is. So when I train, especially when I train athletes, or I train a lot of riders that are competing and stuff like that, then we do the visualization practice. But I do a little bit of it. I'm not trained in that area. It's just basically I tell them like what I've done and what's worked for me. But yes, I do.
You know what's so interesting about that is that when my friend that is now that teaches Qigong, she was not able to actually physically move her body when she started the practice. She was basically going through the movements in her mind until her body aligned and hopped on board. And because I think there was a point where they were like, "You're not going to walk again." And she was like,
Mhm.
"Oh shit, I've got young kids." And what? Excuse me. And so, but that was her thing too. She's like, I couldn't actually do the things, but I sat and I watched the instructor, and I like in my mind I could visualize my body doing the things until it did. So I think people but it goes both ways too, right? Like when you think about people that would come to me for like, oh, I can't canter, or they had a story, I can't canter because this happens, or, this is what my horse does here. They can rerun that story visually in their mind on repeat and really anchor it in. And when I say close your eyes and let's visualize what it looks like to do that without your story attached, it's really hard. People don't even realize, well, if you can't do it in your mind, how could you possibly ever create it in real life? So it is such a powerful thing for people to, dabble in and then dive into.
Yeah, can you talk about, because we were in a total, I feel like, state when we were at Elements of Connection, but can you talk about, we were in a vortex, so it's hard to really remember, but how you had us write our horse's story. And then I can't remember, I just remember like how powerful it was for me, but we wrote our story, and then we burned it, and then we had a power statement. Can you talk about that process?
I say visual, I see it because I'm very visual, right? But we have to speak to people that have their different senses that are heightened. Some people feel stuff, some people hear stuff. And so the story, however it comes to you about yourself, your horse, we focused on the horse, obviously, but it's instead of moving through that perspective and always making decisions, making choices, creating an experience around this old story, whether it's our story from this actual lifetime or handed down to us from our ancestors, past lives, we can go there if we want. But but
Yes.
it's like, what is my story? What is the story I keep telling about me and how I got here and my horse and how they got where they are and why they are the way they are. And we don't ever let them move beyond that and actually tell us where they are in this moment. And Shayleigh's always talking about, oh, new segment, which is like basically my new favorite thing ever all the time. And we're doing our manifesting magic. And everyone's like hopping on board, like everyone's obsessed where it's like the animals in general stay in each segment, right? And they like jump on the bed, new segment, go out the dog door, new segment. And people tend to just grip so desperately to all the old segments and what they mean and why do they mean that. And so by taking a little book from our animals and having them teach us, like you get to have a new segment every time. So the old story can just be, recognize that maybe all of this did happen and I'm not gonna not honor what if it was hard or if it was really painful or whatever it is, but I can take that and I can release that and I can say, if it helps you to pull virtues through, like this is why I am here now, or if you can look back and go, if that didn't happen then XYZ wouldn't have happened, but to release it so that you're not continuously living from that space, because nothing new can be created from an old stagnant thing. You're only going to get more of that. So the importance of very intentionally saying like, okay, I'm going to honor this. I'm going to pull the lessons. I'm going to see why it happened. And then I'm going to release it and have new segment. And the I am statement, I feel like that was really born from actually this book that I've had for years, which apparently now is a collector's item. And I just finally sent it to Shayleigh for her Christmas present. It arrived yesterday. I'm like, that's what you get for being my friend. Sorry, I kept forgetting.
Yeah.
Um, but it talks a lot about that. And the I am statements are so powerful. So it's like a lot of people like, oh, I did this and I'm this way because, and my horse is this way. And instead of very intentionally going like, who am I from this moment forward? Who am I right now in this segment? And you get to create an entire life experience around that. And people really hand their power away, I think, constantly because they're living from their own story, because it feels familiar. They know it really well. You can always fall back on that. For me, it was very in a state of victimhood in relationship because I could actually very easily connect with other people around it because people could, oh, I've been hurt too. Oh, look at the wrong that had been done to me. Oh my gosh, yes, yes, me. I'm such, oh, it was so hard for me. And so, yes, I can look back and say, yes, all of that did happen. And yeah, it did really fucking suck. But honestly, my life I would not be doing what I'm doing now. I never would have gone on a healing journey. I would have been stuck in the stagnant misery that I lived in for most of my life. So I can look at, I don't have to be the person that gets cheated on. I am not the person that is not enough for people anymore. That's an old story that served me and I could connect with people, but now I know how to connect with people from a healthier, more sustainable way. So it's about burning that story, and be like, who am I now in this segment? And then moving forward from that. So that was basically why I wanted to do that, because I feel like you don't want to not acknowledge people's stories, with their horses because they're really important to them. They come with these stories like, oh my gosh, this is me and my horse, and this is what we've been through, which is great. And it is why they signed up to be in life with you. But like, how can we release grip and create something different and new and more expansive?
That activity, well, all of the activities, but like that activity was so incredibly powerful for me because like I felt like that was the activity. And so anybody listening to this, if you need the whole protocol, you're going to have to really message Amber yourself. But basically what it did for me is it cut cords from the people that my I am statement was I am free. And I didn't know what that meant. And Amber was like, just trust your intuition, Sonny. And I was
Oh
like,
yeah, because I had people come. That's what it was a really powerful day for me as well because I feel like it was the first time that I really got to see a new story for me actually. So it was as healing for I think everyone. And I've done a lot of ceremonies and a lot of stuff, but that there was something about that morning where I was like, oh fuck, like this is and I don't know if it was the lighting or the smoke and the sun rising. It was just like and I
all of it,
all I could see
all
was
of it.
like smoke from my little Cuisinart cauldron and this just a crowd of people and people coming up one at a time with like the sun rays behind them and being in this smoke and having their little old story and and then allowing in that moment that I am statement to just drop in without trying to think about what it is. Oh, think about it, and that for people was like, I don't know what to say. And I was like, just say the next thing that wants to come out of your mouth. And I was like, oh, I need to think about it. It's like tapping people into that moment. Yeah. So that moment for a lot of people and me was
Yeah,
super powerful.
that's what I tell people too is as training, like a lot of people have like they're like, you've helped me with this or this. And I'm like, they've helped me. Like they've helped me learn all this stuff. But so that's really cool that it was just as powerful for you because in the moment for me, I was like, I remember going up and I had my paper and then I was like, oh, and I stepped back. I was like, I don't have my I am statement yet. And then you were like, trust your intuition. And you were sitting there by the burning pile. And I was like, okay. I was like, I know that's why I'm here, but it's so hard. And so I was like, I have no idea what to say. So I like crumpled it up and then I was just like, I am free. And then like that was like the catalyst to like so many crazy things that like I haven't even really talked about yet, but it's like so many crazy things that like it was like I took all of my power back in that moment. And like I realized, so this was like last month, I had a healing session with Denise. She's my body worker here, but she
Oh.
does, girl, if you come to Lexington, you have to get an appointment with her. She's the best. So she should be like famous and like nobody, only if you know kind of person. And so we're sitting there and Steph had started doing spiritual coaching sessions with her because she also does that. But I always just go in for body work. I'm like, man, fix my shoulder and all this stuff. And so I was like, okay, so Steph has had really amazing spiritual coaching sessions. So I would like to do a spiritual coaching session. And she's like, okay. And we talk all the time. I train her as well. And so we sat down and she starts like, I was not now, but I was going through just like a situation with somebody in my family. And like, we just don't, we how do I say it? It's a tough relationship. It's a very challenging relationship for both of us. So it's not like, oh, well, she's like that. And no, it's like it's challenging for both of us. We both like rub each other, right? And so I'm like, man, she makes me feel like small and she makes me blah blah blah. And Denise is like, okay. She was like, nobody can make you feel small. So what do you think she's teaching you? And I was like, oh, and it like this was shortly after Elements of Connection. And I was like, oh, I was like, she's teaching me not to give my power away. But since with our dynamics in the family, it's like when you go around your family, which is so interesting after like all the spiritual work that you begin to do and you start getting into, and then you go back to your family and you're like, oh man, you know what I mean? And so like, I'm just like, it was really hard for me to like be in that energy, like that kind of dense energy. And so, she basically, Denise was like, it just hit me like in that moment, but hit me in a different way. Cause you can say, like, don't give your power away. But what does that actually mean when you're in practice? And so, like, I realized, and you all helped me realize too, that like I just give my power away to make myself feel small, to not like expand, I guess is the best way to describe it. And so that's what that was kind of like the ending of the year for me. And that was a big realization that I came to. So anyway, I just felt like saying that.
Yeah, it's
That's
good.
awesome.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
because that sometimes that staying small feels like safety. And when people will talk about, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I'm afraid to fail, I'm like, are you? Or are you afraid of success? Because that actually feels like more prevalent when I talk to people than the other, which is so interesting because it's like, well, of course I want to succeed. And it's like, well, that's interesting because you're doing everything the opposite of, and why, whether it's consciously or not. But it's like, oh, and that was totally my thing. Because what if you do have success? Well, then what if you lose it? Oh God, it's so much worse if you have something and then lose it. I would rather just not have it at all. So it's
Yeah.
just such an interesting conversation to have when you're in the space of like growth and expansion and like, doing work with yourself to do these things. It's like to really start to examine that stuff.
Yeah, and for me, it was more about, so we moved, I went to nine, I want to say nine different schools before the age of 10. So
Mm,
for me, it was about like, I was always afraid of losing people, so
mm,
I wouldn't connect with them. So I realized this like last year, beginning of the year, I would like keep everybody out here because like my motto was like everybody's gonna leave. Like everybody's gonna leave. You can't get too close to people. And so then now like I feel like I have the ability to actually connect with people. Whereas, and I was seeking, and I've been seeking it like for so long, but for the literal first time in my life, like I feel like I can actually deeply connect with people, but because I don't have that fear of like, it's okay if you lose somebody, but you can invest in this person. Like you can invest in them and trust that they're not going to go, and actually connect with them and not just be like, no, I'm good. Like I'll be friendly, but I'm also like not going to let you in. Um, so I feel like elements of connection was like the last piece of that puzzle that I needed to like really step into that. So thank you for that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's super powerful. So, in the spirit of not taking up too much of your time, being respectful, we like never want our guest podcast to end. We always are like, oh, God, it's ending. In the spirit of not giving your power away and knowing what you know now, what advice would you give someone who's kind of like in in that space where you were? Like, so if someone's like really painful, they don't know where to go, they're kind of like stuck in their body, because you know how sometimes it can be overwhelming, like when you're so uncomfortable and you don't know where to start and you're stuck in like that what would you tell someone from a place of you calling your power back? Like, where would they start on their internal journey? I mean, of course, seeking therapy and things like that, but I'm just curious how you feel.
Um, Thank you for asking that. I would say, and that's what I'm learning too, is like, how do you, because it's hard once you've reached a certain point to like remember, how that felt for me. And so, because I feel like I have this like weird memory loss, it's probably the concussions. I also played football too. So like, but I would say open your consciousness, whatever that means to you. So whether it's reading a book, listening to an audible book, listening to podcasts like this, listening to people that have a vibration that's higher than yours, and you can feel that when you're around that energy, when you're like, oh, what is it about that person? I had a lot. I'm a seeker. I've always been an experiencer and a seeker. So I just like sought out information, and that's what helped me. I grew up, or excuse me, I had a animal card reading that matters for this conversation, but she basically said like, in my animal card reading I had, you'll be so interested in this, Shayleigh. We'll have to talk another time about it. But one of them was what is it? Not the flamingo. Oh my gosh, what is it? But very similar. But anyway, the point is the mother and the father, they have the egg and then they leave the egg. And then this bird, the ibis, has to make the like figure out its like own way kind of thing. And I think for me, that's exactly, kind of how we were free range parenting. We kind of raised ourselves, but I'm really grateful for that. But that also gave me a skill set that I didn't realize other people don't have. So from that skill set, I would say what you need to do is seek out information to raise your consciousness and your vibration. And then you'll be able to get your power back. My daily ritual that I do every day is especially since I work with clients, is I call my pieces and parts back. So whether you pray or manifest, whatever you want to call it, is I say, I'm calling, and I usually do this in the shower because, you're cleansing your energy and your physical field. So I call in all of my pieces and parts back, and then I give everybody's pieces and parts back to them. So what that means in a literal term, because I'm a very literal person, is like, I feel like sometimes people, you have your energy vampires, like the people that just kind of suck that life force from you. But there are people that I feel like they put like barnacles on you, or they give you words that are not your words. And so that's what I mean when I'm saying that, is I give that back to them. But in a scenario with a family member, I feel like that's the toughest because you have family dynamics. So I'm the younger child. So I was always like the youngest, the one that's the stupidest, the one that's always like, why are you saying it like that? And so the most inexperienced, right? And so for me, I'm the younger child. So I slip back into that family dynamic of I'm the youngest. I'm that, so you have to decide consciously, and maybe you could use visualization too, that you're not that person anymore. The other thing that I did is I did a lot of timeline work. So I had a woman walk me through, she called it imagination training. And so we're little kids, we had such great imaginations, but then you lose that as an adult. Most people do. And so what she did is she had me go back to that timeline of like very traumatic situations. And then I would bring that little girl to where I am now and be like, look, like you're going to be fine. And then you basically parent yourself. So that therapeutic modality was really good. I also really struggled with meditation. I really struggled with disassociation. So I couldn't drop into my body for real, but I did a lot of things that required me to be in my body, like lift weights, ride horses. So I think that really set me up for success. But I would say, uh, when you're disassociating, you might not even realize that that's what's happening, that you're just completely out of your body and not feeling things. So like for me, I never cried. Like I was like, I'm not a crier. I don't cry. I don't do that. I'm not emotional. So that was not true. That was me disassociating. And so now like something will just hit my heart and I'm like, oh, that was just so sweet. I'm just crying. And I just embrace that. So like if you feel like you're feeling that, it's just like you have to feel things. You have to let your body feel, especially if you're grieving or you're going through a hard situation. You just have to let yourself feel it and work through that. And therapy is great for that. And it could be fitness therapy, it could be horse therapy, you could have a coach, a spiritual coach. If you're really struggling with family dynamics and stuff like that, like definitely recommend that you use as many modalities as your budget will allow. And then it pays off after the dark night of the soul.
Post Dark Night of the Soul.
Post Dark Night of the Soul and the circle that you all did. You'll be fine.
So what do you have going now? Like if people want to work with you, or what does that look like?
Okay, so right now I'm taking 5 online clients, and that's people that need custom online programming. I don't do a lot of online. I am an in-person girl, so it would have to kind of fit if I believe that I can help you, then people can apply for that. Personal training, I do in person in Lexington, Kentucky. So you just go to soulfitnesslex.com and then you fill out a form and then I contact you, whether that's in person training or online training. Um, what else? We also have it's Soul Fitness Academy, or soulacademylex.com. I'll give you the link. But we have an academy for the personal trainers. And then on a local level, I am going to be working with Celeste more as well, through this year on getting, not my BTMM certification, but she's going to help train me to where I can start providing that for people here in Lexington, Kentucky. So I'm kind of dabbling in that sort of training with people in Lexington. So in which case you would just need to send me a text and I can give you my number. If you or an email, we'll say an email, Sunny at Soul Fitness Lex.
Perfect. Yeah, well, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thanks for having me.
And
I really appreciate it.
yes, fun as always. And I know everyone's like, we don't want it to end either. Hey, look, we usually have people. I mean, we have a couple people that we're going to need to bring back on that we already interviewed. As things progress and expand for you, we'll obviously have to have a little reunion
Yes,
podcast.
I would love to. I would love to do any of this. It's so fun to just connect with you all and spend time with you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. And we will definitely put all the links in the show notes so everyone can reach out to you. And so excited to see what you have in store for your future and where you take all this. It's exciting.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all having me on the podcast.